like a relatively socially conservative bent when it comes to like DEI, wokeness in video games. And he has found a comfortable space in talking about, like, you know, right-wing politics in general. His views, his pixelated titties are good and woke is bad. But yeah, it's, you know, this stuff is banging. Like his like super basic right-wing, like, look how stupid the liberals are content is popping off. Now, having said that, outside of that space, like the Candace Owenses of the world are popping off as well. A lot of people also in the podcast sphere, are, you know, they're getting tremendous play. All the top podcasts are incredibly right-wing. You got Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson. Like, I'm not even talking like regular old Republican right-wing. I'm talking like Christian nationalists, openly saying like insane, hysterical about Christianity, leaning into overt anti-Semitic sentiments. So it's bad. It's not good, folks. It's bad. Some of them are connected with the manosphere. A lot of those manosphere guys are also, in the way that they are leaning, a lot of those manosphere guys, in the way that they're leaning into like right-wing commentary, they've also increased the stakes a lot, you know? All the while, we're still here.
Oh my God.
Who is this?
Oh my God. Who is that?
Boogie.
With the camera.
I see you. Boogie. Hey, Michael, we gotta talk.
What are you doing here?
Well, I'm letting myself in right now. Is what I'm currently doing. Why are you naming videos about me?
Ooh, I'm trying so hard, all right? We're not gonna mention Slippy the Toad from Star Fox. We're not gonna mention it, all right? We're not gonna mention any of the characters from Chicken Little, all right? We're not gonna mention any of those things, guys, all right? We're keeping that to ourselves. Instead, we're gonna focus on this just masterpiece of comedy on YouTube. Now, I don't know how we've reached this point that Kid Behind the Camera is still consistently getting around 100,000 views a video. Who the hell is watching this garbage? I'm being absolutely genuine. I mean, I get it, it's kids, I understand. Bookster over here putting on an acting performance of a lifetime. We could only actually wish that this faked death that they do as a skit a little bit later in this video might have actually come to fruition, but we're not fortunate enough for that. Fortunately, what we are fortunate enough is to get to sit here and watch some of this and be like, wow, this is what the Boogster's up to. When Saturated's not around to slam doink on him, we're stuck here watching Kid Behind the Camera skits with Boogster. Wow, I can't wait for that. I know I'm excited too, guys. I'm really, really giddy. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Why are you going to my stuff? T-I-N-A. What is that? Tina! You got me involved with that psychotic Tina. That's you, Mike. That's on you. How is that my fault? On you.
Of course it's hot.
Oh, wow, it's hot. Wow, it's hot. Why would I chill with you? Sunday, Monday. I would never in my life chill with you. What?
It's honestly an anomaly that the Foundation hasn't given out. There is so much girth running around these floorboards in there. It is, you know, shout out to all the low wage white monster drinking construction workers that put this house together. Thank God for them. Otherwise, you know, we might have actually gotten something funny out of it, having Boogster fall through the floor and being stuck in the substrate. But unfortunately, we didn't get that. We're stuck with this new character. Her name is Tina. She's shown up in some other things. She's associated with Kid Behind the Camera, so she's just this fake outrage character. Who gives a shit, right? Like, yawn pass. You know, if it's not Boogster getting slam dunked upon, what's even the point anymore? So basically, I want to talk about this just briefly because I'm not sure if I'll make a video about it at some point. Keemstar, yes, he has to show up in this video as well. You know, we're basically creating the pentagram of an unholy union of the worst people on the planet. He has come up with an ingenious idea because Lolcow Live has been such a success, and now he's gonna do a female version of Lolcow Live, which is kind of perplexing because the show doesn't really center around Lolcow females necessarily. It's just a bunch of like train wreck people that are like slightly adjacently associated with the people on the original show, because in theory, you know, you would have to get actual notable Lolcows like Wings and like Boogie were to be on the show. They tried to get someone like Foodie Beauty to show up, but she's not going to be on the show. Amber Lynn's not going to be on the show. Tofiachu needs money. Maybe she'll show up on the show. Who knows? But instead we have somebody like Tina, you know, the one-legged pirate running around, screaming and hollering, creating fake drama with Boogster. And that's supposed to be, hell yeah, brother, we're gonna make the best show in the entire world. Everybody's gonna tune in for that. I can't wait. Now, obviously, since Lolcow Live is still kicking, it's actually doing kind of okay. Like, you know, it's averaging like 40, 50K viewers a stream, whatever. I don't know who these, you know, mouth breathing, drooling idiots are that are consistently tuning into the fake slot content garbage that comes out of it. And we're gonna see why, because Boogster puts it into his own hands. He's like, we gotta get the viewers in, baby. We gotta get people tuning in. How are we gonna do that? Well, it's gonna be me and Kid behind the camera faking my death. It's gonna be so funny. I can't wait.
Boogie, please stop. Boogie, please stop.
Baby, please don't.
Oh my God.
Let's not do this, please.
Can we have a nice day? Yes, we're gonna have a great day.
Why?
What if the ledge breaks?
Yeah.
We were really close to seeing the Emperor and Slippy falling off the same balcony together, and that just would have been a tragedy. You know, I don't know what Desi was thinking. She thought that she, with her 100 pounds of muscle, was gonna stop Boogie and his 5,000 pounds of fat from just toppling off the edge. And the crazy part is, right, they're on vacation somewhere, they're at the beach somewhere, who gives a shit? The amount of times that I have read a story, now it's not super frequent, but the amount of times I've seen stories of, oh, well, a drunk guy at spring break fell off the balcony. And now we got a man who can't even stand on his own, lifting himself up on a box over the edge of the balcony. And we're sitting here praying to God that the minimum wage, you know, foreigner construction worker that put this balcony railing together is going to hold Boogster from falling and plummeting to his death. Now, it would be kind of crazy to see Fat Man Bomb number 2 explode, but but we've got even better faking, all right? You know, the whole content is faked. Well, let's just see how much he can push himself. At this point, we're getting dangerously close to showing up in Hollywood, I feel like.
Yeah, help me up. Help me up. I got it.
Baby! 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 What the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you
Damn it,
doing
we
this?
lost the lead.
Boogie.
Baby, are you playing?
Get him on his back.
Not funny.
Go on.
Pinch his ass.
I don't know what's going on.
The only thing I know is going on, that dude, motherfucker's fat as a
Because
motherfucker.
he could really like drop dead.
I'm free.
We're gonna call 911, Boogie. Do you want that to happen?
Baby!
Do it. No, don't. Do it, Des.
No! No, Mike, no! Mike!
Baby!
I just did my hair! I looked good, and now you screwed it up!
That's No more death.
Bitchy behavior. That's bitchy
Not funny.
behavior.
No more dying.
You want to see what I can do now? Watch this. Listen.
Jesus.
I can get up on the floor on my own. It's not even a big deal.
Oh man, this is actually the worst shit I've seen in a long time. Like, full stop. I'd rather see Mama Chew shitting on the sidewalk. I'd rather see a lot of horrible, grotesque things more than having to sit through a minute long of unedited baby, you know, just for shits and giggles. Why don't I take a portion of Desi talking and just put Slippy quotes over it and see if it's more enjoyable? Maybe that's something, you know. This is a little tech advice for you, Boogster and kid behind the camera. You want to make your content better? Replace every voice line that Desi does with Slippy from Star Fox. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be comedic genius.
Slippy's here. Are you okay?
Get him on his back.
Darn it. Don't worry.
I know you guys are trying really hard. You know, this is some Leonardo DiCaprio, you know, it makes sense in more than just the acting ways, if you're catching my drift, type of thing, where we're just putting out an acting of a lifetime here. I mean,
Dates
we're gonna
young
win
women.
the Grammys, Golden Globes, whatever, you know, fake content creator of the year. Who knows what else you could win? This was excellent, and it helps me out, obviously. You know, I have to show some respect because Boogie gets to do this god-awful content, and in fairness, he gets to be flown out or drive to wherever these vacation locations are, probably get them paid for by his rich buddies, and then he gets to do shitty content, make no money off of it, but hey, he had the experience. He got to have a free meal out of it, and that's all that Boogster could really care about. Now, speaking of free meals, we get to have an excellent Thanksgiving type of special live stream for Lolcow Live, where Boogster goes to Wing's house, and kid behind the camera's there, and yeah.
In like 10 minutes, I have 2.5 thousand people in here. We're gonna have 4,000 by the time it's done. I'm gonna smash up this house. I'm gonna give people what they want, okay? Because I know what they want. I'm gonna put on a good show, and I'm gonna do it without you, King. I'm doing this without you.
Are you really? Yeah.
Hey, boss.
I'm a bald gnome. I'm a piece of shit. I'm all this.
Somebody donate for him to slap the hat.
I think, you know, if you coming back.
So we got Big Cherry sitting on the left, and we got Fake Drama sitting on the right. This is just what everybody dreams of. And here's the thing, right? Like, a gripe for viewers of Keemstar in the past was that his entire audience are children, and it's all sort of starting to come together. How is Kid Behind the Camera getting such a large audience to tune into his obviously fake bullshit garbage? How is Keemstar still running this podcast? Well, it all makes sense. Their entire audience are just little kids who are tuning in saying, oh my god, Keemstar showed up? They didn't even know he was gonna be there, because the critical thinking skills of the audience of Lolcow Live somehow have a lower IQ than Wings. I don't know how it's possible, right? 62 IQ pimp. I'm not sure how it's possible, but there were legitimately people, because I saw when this moment happened, of people saying, oh my god, Keemstar showed up, oh my god, acting like this wasn't the most staged bullshit thing in the entire world. But there's people, they're clamoring, oh my god, they're gonna argue with each other, he's gonna get fired for the 40th time this week. And in case, you know, I don't talk about Boogie, and I don't talk about the stream very often anymore, the whole reason is it's all fake, it's all scripted, and the only appeal that they try and get is, oh my god, this person's getting fired. Oh my god, this person's getting fired. That's literally every single stream. Boogster, he's fired. You want to know why he's fired? Because he couldn't see his dick in the mirror this morning. Fired. Get rid of him. And then Boogster will make his own my life is so hard, guys. I can't take this shit no more. And all the 12-year-olds who are tuning into the stream, oh, they're lapping it up. They think it's so fucking great. This is the best content I've ever seen in my entire life. I can't wait to tune in next week. Next week, they're definitely gonna fire somebody. I can't wait.
Season 1. That's the main reason why I'm here. We have to launch the Season 1 Collector's Edition of LOLCOW Live. And guys, we did bring that box. I'm gonna give you that box. There are only 5 king sets available. And gentlemen, we're all gonna be signing these hats.
Oh, those look good.
You can put that box down. Thank you. We're all gonna be signing those hats. We do need a marker of some sorts.
And I want to make this abundantly clear. If your preference for merchandise is something that Keemstar and the rest of the LOLCOW Live dudes have made, and it's just the cow with the 3D glasses on that says LOLCOW Live on it, and you're like, hell yeah, great logo, brother. You deserve whatever's gonna be thrown your way when you're walking around in public wearing that thing. So it seems like they're getting a collection of their signatures, because who doesn't want it? This is internet history right here. I would love to get a signature from man who sits in the dark and plays Rainbow Six Siege all day, or man who, I don't know, promised to do Drama Alert again but realized that nobody's gonna watch it, so he's too afraid to launch it again. Or man who fakes literally everything about his life and is dating a little child. Oh my god, I can't wait to get those signatures, baby. That would be great. It would be much better if you, Keemstar, here, I'll throw out a business proposition for you, buddy. Here's what I think you should do. Tell Boogie to do a personalized dog walking on the collar video like he did in the past for each of the people that buys one of these things. That might actually make it worthwhile. Make him eat shit out of the backyard. Make him dig his own grave with his hands like a dog would. All those things would be hilarious. That's something I can get behind. Your signature on some AI slop art garbage? Nah, that's not really for me, buddy.
We're gonna go back there.
Listen, everything's calmed down now. Come in here.
Dude, Boogie, I got you. You're safe.
Boogie, come on. Boogie, in here or you're fired. Don't God damn it, Keith. Get your ass in here or I'll fire your ass. Follow this idiot all the way here, and he didn't use his turning signal once, by the way.
I don't believe in him.
You don't believe in a turning signal?
No!
So this is just, what else can I possibly add that I haven't added at this point? Let's bring it outside, guys. Boogie, he got so upset that Tina showed up, so he had to go run away. Do you guys think Boogster's gonna come back? Well, he does come back because he's promised free food at a restaurant. But guys, they try and pull a prank that he's gonna have to pay for it. Isn't that crazy? And then Fat Man has to get back in his car and be a danger to the rest of society, just turn in whatever he wants to. That's just some supreme content right there, baby. And now, one of the final clips I want to talk about is Boogie basically has given up on his YouTube channel. The stream, the podcast is enough revenue for him that he doesn't really need his own channel anymore. So he doesn't really focus on it. But one of the things that he chose to do was a charity style edited video that was honestly kind of insufferable to sit through, but Boogie actually hired editors for it, so it was slightly better than the usual slop that he puts out there.
How much fucking soup have I bought? Why do I have so much soup? I thought I'd do it, but...
So basically he ends up traveling to a bunch of different places and whatever, and he decides to do some sort of giving thing that he gives some food to some homeless people in his town, because apparently he found out that there's a big homeless population there or something. But like, on one hand, sometimes I can kind of understand people that are genuinely recording these videos so that they can make a profit to be able to go back out and give food or whatever to people in need. Boogster would do it because he has a horrible image and a horrible reputation, so he thinks, if I do a community thing and I do some charity work, some people might actually respect me. And there will be people down below saying, oh, good job, Boogster. Because at the end of the day, yes, people do get helped out, but let's not mince words, right? Like, he's doing it to try and fix his own reputation, to try and make himself feel better, but he's just like a wicked, horrible person with like no redeemable qualities. So I'm not even gonna, you know, good for the people that were able to get things off of this, but I'm not gonna give Boogster any flowers.
Losing A.
Woo! Look at you go.
I don't know if you guys could hear that, but I could hear that thing clapping. That thing was clapping on the way over to us. And I you know, keep your hands where I can see them, buddies, all right? Because that was some mean clapping going on. But this has basically been our monthly Boogster update. It might even get more infrequent than that because dear God knows what's going to happen. If you're interested in getting at least an initial reaction, interest into the female workout live thing, let me know down below. I'll look into it. There's, I don't know, like a 5% interest at this point. I've compiled some of the clips, but who knows? It might be a bigger train wreck. Maybe I'll love it. Maybe it'll be the best thing ever, but for now, I'm a bit apprehensive. So either way, guys, hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.
Take it C. Control of Bravo.
We're going to be discussing the conflict between Israel and Gaza.
Securing B. We're losing Alpha. Losing A. Taking Bravo underway.
I think the first thing we're going to cover today is going to have to be the CEO. I'm blasted by AP's whiteness here. Go ahead. We'll go out there. The police have arrested Luigi Mangione? I don't know. I'm not an Italian American. I'm a good friend that is, though, so you can't accuse me of anything. They are accusing a guy named Luigi being the CEO assassin. Well, I think all this is interesting. We can talk about it. First of all, let me just say at the top of it, my take on the whole thing is if it's okay for like CEOs to kill people and denying them healthcare coverage, I think it makes a lot of sense that emotionally speaking, there would be people that would seek this kind of resolution. And I think it is the fault of the capitalist system that this happened. Whether, you know, I mean, whatever the fucking CEO's name, I've already forgotten, don't care. No one does. Whatever that guy's name was, it is irrelevant. It is a symptom of a sickness in this country that people with sickness can't seek health care. It's not something that we should pay. Health care is not something for the wealthy alone. It is deeply unethical to argue otherwise. And frankly, you're cucked as fuck unless you are, I mean, somehow getting free health care by being, I don't know, a healthcare CEO probably, like an owner, a shareholder, on the board, as it were, you probably get free stuff. Other than that, the system's not working for you. You don't need. So also, insofar as like the way this is going, I don't know what Luigi himself has said. I'm sure that we could do a whole video on this, but I'm going to wait for more information to come out. But thus far, the information we seem to have that makes me a little sus about the situation is that he did all this and it looked pretty like legitimate, and he gave them the slip, and it was a pretty good job.
And then the way they're telling this story has some cop fuckery kind of smelling about it. He was apparently turned in because he had eyebrow. He looked like this guy with a mask on. He's like, I don't know, maybe that's the guy. And someone was like, yeah, he looks Italian American. That's him. I mean, they might have the guy himself, but I don't know. I feel like this story is going to unfold interestingly. I don't know. It just seems like a touchstone. Maybe it's nothing, but it feels like something. So the thing I want to highlight is how the right is covering this. Because at the same exact time, you have Daniel Penny, who was the guy who choked like a homeless guy to death on the subway in New York when he was having like a mental health crisis. The right is celebrating that kind of vigilante justice, where it's a guy with no power systemically or otherwise. I think he was also not white. I don't know. I don't even remember. It doesn't matter. But the way they are covering this is so weird, right? It's happening at the same time. They want this guy to be free because it's a class thing. It's just so clearly a class thing. He has 2 videos. This is the courtroom. Back-to-back videos. I'm not joking. Daniel Penny not guilty. Courtroom erupts as BLM threatens his life as he walks free. And then woke leftists celebrate CEO being assassinated in NYC. United CEO had gotten threats recently.
Bravo.
This man objectively harmed more people than the homeless guy Daniel Penny ever harmed. Objectively, he could have gone on a killing spree and killed everybody in that subway car, which he didn't, and he still would have had less blood on his hands than this motherfucker. Like, just through the nature of his job of denying coverage. Their denial rate, United Health, highest in the country, 33%. You have a 2/3 chance of getting your health care covered. Great. That's so good. And by the way, other healthcare companies are not that good. The next one down was like 25%. It was like Blue Cross. It's crazy, dude. Anyway, look at this. This is how Laura Ingraham covers this shit.
We'll dig into it later. The Instagram posts from nutbag people, which I was sent in the commercial break earlier, crazy. Like, he's cute, and people celebrating this. This is a sickness.
This is a sickness, people celebrating it. Like they used to celebrate bank robbers stealing from the banks, you know, during the Great Depression. And thereabouts. Hilarious. It's just like,
Sniper is down.
It's obviously a class thing, right? Like, these people are served by the upper class, by the CEOs. They know that they have friends that are CEOs. I have also ground the working man into dust. This is how we have forged common ground. Listen to how she continues on. This is 29 seconds of uncut footage.
Honestly, it's so disappointing, but I guess we shouldn't be surprised. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And up next, the other big news out of New York, Daniel Penny. A lot of people think he's a hero, and tonight he's not guilty. My take next.
Look, how fucking bold. You can only be, when you're Laura Ingraham, you can only be nefarious and know exactly what the fuck you're doing in this situation, or genuinely be so lack of self-awareness that this doesn't, like, connect in your brain whatsoever. They're just always on the opposite side of what we ought to be on the side of, and it's so clear that Fox News is a propaganda wing for the people getting away with the crimes. We have allowed a group of apes, much like ourselves, to have this kind of messaging so that they can get away with crimes, like being a healthcare CEO and murdering people, so that they can hoard the wealth, so they can hoard the resources, as all of us work for it. Mostly all of you. I mean, I'm part of the working class. I have done this, but I'm sort of like secondarily removed for it as an entertainer of the working class, right? You guys trickle down to me. You know what I mean? It's like, how the fuck can we, as a group of people, not be aware of who the problem is? Like, being a leftist or whatever, it's not a matter of political conviction. It's just a matter of like, hey, we deserve better than this, man. I don't think we should have kings and shit. I mean, we literally just do. A billionaire is not different. What it used to be is just like they used to be the lords of the land. They used to just like fucking claim the land and rule over it with an iron fist, and whoever wanted to like be subservient to that got to live there and work for this person who had like a fucking military and the technology to back it up. It was literally just wealthy people. This is not different. And you will see the same thing happen as this sort of technocracy increases and these billionaires and the CEO get wise to this shit, and you're gonna start to see like more militarized arrangements around them and their security personnel and shit like that. I can't believe cyberpunk is kind of like just basically going to be true. Yeah. Maybe without the spider arms, but maybe with them if we work hard at it. Fox News has 2 jobs, and that is to keep your horrible elderly family member angry enough to keep their heart beating and to make sure that the poors know their place. Well, the number one objective is, of course, to make money off of all of this. So let's see the quarterings. Let's see how much I can stand of the woke leftists celebrate being a CEO being assassinated.
A man shot in Midtown just a short time ago. We're told he is in grave condition. It happened on 54th Street
like in the grave condition.
Between 6th and 7th Avenues. Police telling us
one.
a 50-year-old man was struck in the chest. He was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital, and police tell us they are looking for a man with a black mask and carrying a gray backpack.
You're just playing the fucking footage? I thought you guys tried to do stuff. Looking for a man in a black oh, okay, see, you're making fun of New York. Oh, okay, I'm gonna turn it down anyway. It's loud as fuck. Holy shit. Mask up.
Dude, like, what is it? Why? Oh, I've got the fucking dark MAGA hat too. You bunch of nerds can eat my shit.
Why are you showing only black people in masks, though? That's strange. His heart was in the right place.
It's called racism, Jake. It's called racism.
Jeremy here from the Quartering. Absolutely wild story for you today. I'm trying to mix up the topics a little bit because I know people.
Dude, he is really evolved as a content creator. He has just full on embraced the I'm a Trump guy, and these are the people who give me money, and he's just like MAGA hat, or as he might say, the mega hat, because he is mega.
People are getting a little burnt out, but this story is just a little bit too big to ignore. So the CEO of United Healthcare was basically summarily removed from this planet in what very clearly looks like a hit in Midtown New York City.
He's fidgety. What's going on with him? What is going on with him? It's Elon's Trump hat? Oh, of course, it's a black one. Makes sense.
Many people believe, it's a result of maybe United Healthcare denied somebody's claim, or
maybe it did,
or this, that, and the other thing. People are, of course, making jokes. I'm not going to police jokes, but I'm not going to really take part in them because, quite honestly, the CEO probably, if that's the case, probably had literally nothing to do with the denial of a particular claim.
What do you mean literally nothing to do? He determines the policy on behalf of the shareholders and the board and stuff. Like, to deny claims at a certain rates and to set policies on what they're going to... Like, yeah, he does. What do you mean? It starts at the top, bro. You are obviously, this... Not really a beneficiary of this, but definitely like... you know, there's a grift to be made in the working class, which, I mean, he essentially, I guess, petite bourgeoisie, because he has his shitty coffee shit. You know, he's essentially just a grifter. And his grift is to kiss the ass of that class.
Over another claim.
And whatever politics that they tell him to have. Too stupid to understand he does it, for sure.
Probably just some woke leftist.
Just a woke leftist. The killer? Well, he said this, I guess, 5 days ago. Anyway, he made a video today talking about the guy. Okay, quartering honey, off topic, but don't do face cam if you're this jittery. Maybe sober up before you start the camera. Oh, you think he's a little sauced? Or maybe he needs a drink to calm him down. He's chapsticking up for some rich guy's butt cheeks. Oh, he fidgets because the love fence is turned up. Oh,
The reason many are believing it's a hit is because of how it played out. The person was waiting for them outside of the hotel. The way they were dressed, which we're going to discuss.
Very woke leftist stuff.
And I don't think they're going to catch this individual. They seem extremely well planned. And, you know,
so this is a thing that surprised me is I think we all agree it seemed well planned. And then now the cops are claiming they found him with like a manifesto and like maybe the gun, or a gun with a suppressor, which wouldn't be the gun because the gun was a like the whole thing was a suppressor. I don't know, man. It seems fishy. This is what I'm saying. Seems weird. Unless he wants to be caught, which would be definitely how it would play out. Probably just nab some random. I don't know. I'd like to hear what the guy has to say.
Pictures, of course, we're going to take a look at. I mean, nothing.
Have any videos come out of him speaking?
Over the line, you know, but the pictures of the suspect, I don't think there's any identifying factors unless this person confesses or something like that. The CEO of United Health Insurance Division was removed from this planet Wednesday morning outside the Hilton Hotel in Midtown New York City.
Yeah, he's just reporting on it. So anyway, this is how like the quartering deals with the CEO getting removed from this planet. And here's how he deals with the Daniel Penny case, this guy being acquitted of, like, or found not guilty, I guess, of choking a guy to death on the subway.
Huge positive news for all of you. Daniel Penny was just acquitted. Smash that like button. He's walking free today.
Yeah, smash his like button. Yeah.
In a trial that never should have happened. The trial of Daniel Penny only happened because he was a white man protecting subway goers against a crazed black man. That's the only fact. That is the only reason why he was ever put on trial. And just moments ago, he was acquitted entirely. We have all the details for you here on the quartering, by the way.
Crazed black man. What a fuck. What a piece of... That's to you. Fucking fascist cunt. Okay.
If you haven't yet, please do subscribe or
fucking cancer. Really? Again? Please do. He can't help it. It's so cynical. It's just constant.
Follow down below so you get notified.
Can he hear himself? I don't know. Why specify race? Well,
of all the most breaking news, that's what I do here. Like the news.
He looks fucking weird, right? His eyes look funny.
Literally just broke 3 minutes ago. I'm recording this video for you to keep you all up to date. I do want to let you know.
What?
I know we got a little behind.
Oh my God. It's crazy. He's breaking news.
He's a crazed cracker.
90 seconds. He has shilled his own shit 3 times. How can you, as a right-wing viewer, watch this shit? Genuinely, how can you not feel like he's just shilling all the fucking time? It's so
all targets
blatant. Oh my God, I got it. I'm just gonna skip to whatever the fuck.
You're working overtime in fulfillment, so I want you to get that.
Shut up, I'm not past it.
Daniel Penny found not guilty.
That's right.
The jury in the
We don't need him for this. I could have read this article.
Penny trial has declared him not guilty of negligent homicide over the chokehold passing of Jordan Neely. Judge Maxwell Wiley on Friday accepted the prosecution's request.
Yeah, man, he murdered Jordan Neely. Look, I'm not saying... Look, there was like a rowdy situation and he killed a guy trying to subdue him while he was having a mental health crisis. I have no problem with someone subduing someone else if someone thinks that there's a problem happening or something. I didn't, I haven't seen the video in a while, but I don't remember that's how it was going down. I remember he was fucking holding on and choking this fucking guy for a long time. Even if it was initially okay, this is another Derek Chauvin situation, only this guy doesn't even have the fucking protection of being a police officer. Like, I'm not saying I need this guy to go away for life for murder or anything, but I think he needs to, we need to acknowledge that this is not correct. This is not how it works. So when vigilante justice goes his way, in the case where the right wing latches onto a case and we should be able to kill homeless people who are, we just say that they have a mental health crisis, and as long as it's not caught on camera, or even if it is caught on camera, but it looks, a certain way, because he's a white ex-military guy or whatever, like.
Who dropped the top charge, which was, of course, was manslaughter, against the Marine vet, the jury could not come to a unanimous decision. Penny's lawyers demanded a hung jury in a new trial, but in a shock decision, the judge will now allow jurors to deliver. This goes back to Friday. They made up to, for on the lesser charge. Now, there were many
negligent homicide, which fucking, if negligent homicide is what you want to go with, is whatever. It's just like the way you guys report on this shit is fucking crazy. We should acknowledge that you can't just kill people if they're having a bad day, but it's also okay to like defend other people. Like, I think we could be fucking reasonable about this, but instead, you guys are just all right-wing, fucking frothing at the mouth. Meanwhile, poor Luigi. Think of poor Luigi. It's not a fucking that was showing random guns on AP that the dude didn't have. He was found at a McDonald's, by the way. Hey, if you're a fucking wage employee, stop being a fucking snitch. Okay, that's what I gotta say.
Snitches get stitches.
Snitch. Literally no reason. No reason to goddamn snitch on anybody. Okay. Look at this. Rookie cop.
Unless they rob you.
We got our guy. We got him. Here he is. In every photo, people are thirsting over this guy. I think this is maybe the least flattering photo I've seen of him. And he's got a banging collarbone, like young Mel Gibson neck. Good for him. I do not see a likeness. I'll be honest. It is a little suspicious. I don't know. I'd like to hear him speak on the subject. I'd very much like to hear him speak on the subject. There are some photos of the guy that look like it could be that, but I think it's important. It's Burger King for me.
I hope you have a fantastic day.
We don't snitch.
Dude, if Trump can get off of his fucking crimes, can we please let this guy walk? Come on.
Dr. Gamble, give one to Free Luigi. That's right. I don't think it looks like the same dude either. Could be coping. And that, Your Honor, is my presentation on why I think you should be able to get away with some crimes. Anyway, put me on that jury. I'll hang that shit too. Put me on that jury.
Pardon that man.
I'd love it. I'm not even anywhere near New York. It would never work.
Your tactics aren't working. Find another way. Hardpoint active. Down.
Grenade incoming.
Hostiles have the hardpoint.
Comes in engine.
Hostiles have captured the hardpoint.
It's called Why I Fell for Feminism, which is a cry for help, if you're asking me. I guess we'll see. This person's name is Erin Bird. Never heard of her. I'm sure she's fine.
Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I look at feminism as a failed social experiment, and I've made videos that address issues surrounding feminism. But in the past, I used to be the biggest feminist you could ever meet.
The biggest feminist you could ever meet.
Recently, I was asked what it took
Pussy hat and all,
for me to go from being such an advocate for feminism to loudly renouncing feminism today. People are curious to know what took place. What was my journey? There was a process involved that required me to get to a point where I questioned my own beliefs. During this process, I learned from reality. I started noticing the impact feminism was having on individual people. Unfortunately, this took several years and a lot of mistakes in order for me to finally come to terms with the lessons life taught me. With that being said, I'm glad that I'm no longer under the delusions of feminism.
I'm going to speak to you. The delusions of feminism. I would love to understand where this is. Let's hear the reasoning.
And I'll be able to pass on what I've learned about it to my daughter and hopefully to my audience as well. In order for me to break down the full doctrine of feminism, I'll have to expose the lies one by one. This will be part of a series on dismantling the lies of feminism. I need to be clear. I do not condone any form of misogyny. Being critical of or even against feminism does not make someone a misogynist.
Against feminism, you support misogyny, you dumb bitch.
I think you can be critical of any sort of idea without being misogynist, but a lot of the reasoning behind the disagreement with feminism is misogyny. So we'll see.
If you believe that this is true, look up the term false dichotomy, and you'll see that this is a logical fallacy. I also don't want to demonize feminists or say that they're bad people. Women and men who identify as feminists have absorbed what their society tells them.
So there's no dichotomy?
You can't punish someone for conforming to their own society.
There's just
no more than you can blame a
you and feminists. Like, where's misogyny play into this?
Especially children, integrate what's around them without
So
even trying to.
baby brain.
I think most feminists believe in fairness and justice, but they've been misguided by pop culture, social media, and circles of university intellectuals. For me, feminism didn't originate from hatred of men, but from envy of them.
Envy?
Hardpoint located.
Wow. All right, so I disagree. Yeah, I do not think that feminists are doing an envy thing. I think they are advocating for their own freedom, basically.
I was a tomboy when I was a kid. I didn't like wearing dresses, and I wasn't interested in makeup. I like to play outside, explore the woods, collect rocks, and I like to read. I was
okay, what does that have to do with anything?
unafraid of getting dirty. I mostly played with a male cousin of mine who was the same age as me, and I remember...
What does this have to do with feminism?
Escape and evade.
Like, who cares? Lifestyle means nothing. You could be the most masculine woman on the planet. You deserve complete control over your body and have equal rights to everyone else. Equal rights to men, if not more rights. Because women arguably carry more of the social weight. And eat it. You could be the most feminine woman on the planet. You could be the most masculine woman on the planet. You deserve equal rights and control of your body.
Feeling like his behavior gained the approval of my family members, but mine didn't. In fact, I felt like my family in general preferred boys.
Okay, so that's sexism. You don't envy his treatment. You are upset that they're treating you different because of your...
I was 14 years old when I walked in on my parents having sex. That's a big moment for any young man.
I think I've seen this.
That moment where you realize your parents are more than just mom and dad. They're also swingers.
It's hot.
I was 14 years old.
Just sex. They're sexist. Yeah. That's not envy. They just shouldn't treat you like that, you know? I mean, I guess you could describe that as envy, but it's not envious of that position.
I never saw my parents having sex. Now they're dead, so I'll never see it.
That difference is the problem, not that I prefer to be treated like a man or whatever.
When puberty was explained to me as a child, it made me feel ill. The idea of my body going through a transformation that rendered me a woman didn't sound too appealing. I remember watching the women out in public with their perfect hair and
That was literally every young woman's experience.
I'm supposed to turn into
It
that,
probably sounds
but I didn't
terrifying.
think I could ever be that pretty.
Yeah, this does sound like some internalized stuff.
And I hated the idea of receiving attention from men because as a child, it sounded disgusting and wrong. I associated femininity with stupidity, crying, complaining.
I've got news for you, lady. Boys think girls are gross.
We're winning. Keep it that way.
For most of the child, for the childhood. Once they there's a very stark change in a boy's perspective of females within their youth. you go from like hating them to be like, what the fuck? Oh my god. It's stark. I don't know if it's as like that kind of changes as stark for women, but at least for me, and I don't even want to speak for all men, but the changeover between like pre-pubescent feelings towards women and post-pubescent feelings towards women is quite a contrast.
Shopping and fragility.
Do you like men?
My mother and sisters were big believers in feminism, even though I was separated from them as a child.
Right. Do you like, so this is a discussion about gender and how you express and stuff, apparently.
And was raised by my father for the majority of my childhood, I still interacted with him enough to absorb the indoctrination. In high school, during my years of self-searching, I embraced feminism fully, and I thought my beliefs would never change. I've always been a person who takes my beliefs very seriously, and I've always been determined to have the integrity to live according to those beliefs.
That's a weird way to take it. I have to make sure that I really care about my beliefs. I mean, you shouldn't have to make sure you care about your beliefs or whatever. Like, you just have them. Because they just logically follow. You're like, oh, okay, this word describes me. I'm an adult. Here's a teenager even. You start to figure out like kind of what these things mean. These different sort of like camps within society. There's a twinge of like odd adherence.
When I started receiving attention from boys, I wasn't ready for it. I didn't know how to respond to it. I had crushes on boys, but I was always too shy to talk to them about it.
Okay.
Literally just describing everyone's childhood.
Or whatever. I also am wondering what kind of relationship.
Why is it supposed to be some mind-blowing wide left shit?
And I'm wondering if that's the kinds of relationships you actually did want, or if you feel obligated to have them, or whatever.
I consider myself to be a late bloomer. I think feminism appeals to women who are intelligent, and this is one reason why it is so insidious. As a child, I remember thinking that I was just as smart, if not smarter, than the boys I interacted with, and this made me confused. I absorbed the message that I later identified as men are the standard, and that women are derivatives.
If you're against something because smart people are against it, you should look in the mirror and be like, are we the dummies? Am I a complete dummy for this? The answer is yes, thank you.
You think of a human, you think of a man, not a woman.
Do you? I don't. You're sexist. That's sexist. Like, that's just sexist. Yeah.
Because women are incomplete human beings.
Surely.
This made me feel defiant and more committed to my feminist beliefs. I genuinely felt that inside, I was no different from a boy. I also felt like the core of who I was separate from my body. I believed that the only difference between men and women was what was between their legs, and I resented the idea that I would be judged by my looks just because I was born a girl. Even as a child, I understood.
You know what, I hate this shit, because even people with the same things between their legs can be very fucking different. What the fuck? This is so stupid. Like, there's just like complete solidarity and like this feeling of like belonging to everyone who's got a fucking dick. Shut the fuck up. It's so stupid. Right wingers are just like, they don't think it through. Their brains are dog shit and they should fucking just jump off and die. Hurt themselves like fatally.
That good looks were superficial and temporary, so I didn't see the point in putting too much stock into it. I believed I had much more to offer the world using my mind.
We're sort of undercutting that whole notion by adhering to things like sexism.
I was taught to have disdain for men. I was taught that they were inherently malevolent and wanted to treat all men as baby-making machines.
By who? Your parents? So some men, definitely. Conservative men are pretty much, it's pretty accurate. But like, you know, who?
I think the reason feminism appealed to me so much as a teenager is because I was thirsting for an identity. According to Erickson's stages of development, the goal of adolescence is to form an identity, and I felt that feminism gave me that identity.
Videos like this, I feel really bad. I mean, I don't, but I kind of do feel like bad, because it is just the essence, the creme de creme, the chef's kiss of self-reporting you could possibly do. She's basically just saying that, like, I'm a loser. I'm an insecure loser.
Now hold it.
And that's why I left the left.
Hardpoint identified.
Got it.
I feel like a lot of people confuse themselves when they try to be like, who am I?
Falling behind, Crimson.
It's like, just be on the ride. You are yourself. Be on the ride, brother. Sister, get on. Just try to like, I don't know. A lot of people, they turn to exterior sources to try to find themselves interiorly.
What is wrong with salami?
And I think it just takes introspection and conversations with other people that are real. Chucky, not offending Absalom.
I felt like I alone knew about this grand conspiracy, and that most people couldn't access the information I knew, and this made me feel superior. However, the reality is that I wasn't good at discerning the truth in the first place. I wasn't thinking critically. I was just subscribing to an ideology that I thought made me unique. And other...
Yeah, so it sounds like you're projecting, because it sounds like you're saying all the women are feminist.
So everyone, I mean, Matt C, I don't know if you're here. You're my I'm your #1 fan. So I don't think you're here because I think you would probably say something because you're that cool, probably the coolest. These I completely forgot what I was gonna say. I got sucked into the Matt C world, and you know, I enjoyed every second of it. No regrets. Clear.
Especially the smart ones. But not me, who really is the smart one, and I'm rejecting feminism, and now I'm making videos about it, and you don't have any self-awareness at all that you're doing this. So it's about your personal liberation and not being compared to men at all. It's not about comparing. It's about understanding independence and personhood outside of that, and not trying to have expectations on people based on their sex or whatever, you know, or gender.
Words, being a feminist made me feel good. It made me feel like I was a righteous person. As I got older and gained a lot more experience,
So that's why you're a feminist? Because it just made you feel righteous?
One by one, all the tenets of feminism disintegrated into falsehoods.
Because
and
it,
at some
like,
point I realized that my brain had been
are your interests as a person?
Like that. I literally don't adhere to any system or whatever. I just think like women are people, they're humans. You know? I don't think you can't do something because you're a girl or whatever.
I felt betrayed.
I hate this glitch where you can see through the bus. I'll have to fix that.
Had led me to make terrible choices that I would later regret.
You give your faith to why do you talk? Why do you
Is that
talk
an enemy
like
drop?
a nun?
Stars have captured the hard point.
Feminism began to negatively affect my life in a major way when I got married. Soon after marrying my husband, I became a mother, and then 8 months later, I started working full-time as a nurse. It became clear in the first 2 years of my marriage that I had no idea how to be a wife, but I was too arrogant to believe that it was my fault. The first 2 years of my marriage were very difficult. I went to marriage counseling with my husband for several months, but things didn't get any better. In fact, they only got worse. My husband and I began having long, drawn-out fights that were sometimes very intense. Most of our fights had to do with my husband not following my orders. I was stubborn, and I had a strong will. I believed that it was my duty to lead him in the relationship.
To lead him in the relationship? What is this? You don't... How can you say you were a feminist? What? No, you guys live together.
Yeah, seriously. Usually a lot like when these like, I was a former feminist or I was a former leftist or whatever. It's like their definition of feminism and leftism is usually bizarre and just not correct.
Hard point is active.
Straight
Hard
up.
point locked down.
What? That's... It's not feminist to be like... fucking extra super nice and bend over backwards for my wife. It's just about respecting her. If she needs help or I just want to help her out, like whatever. Just be her partner. Just be his fucking partner. And I assume he has to do the same. But like, it's mutual. It's not about being in charge or whatever.
I believe that it was my job to hold him accountable for his actions and to punish him in some way whenever he disobeyed my wishes. I was always leading the attack, trying to get him on the defensive. I would nag him in an effort to get him to relent out of sheer annoyance. All of these things made...
Okay, so that's not feminism. That's just you suck.
So good.
But I didn't understand that at the time. I saw members of his family as my enemies, and I told him that he had to choose me over them.
You sound like a narcissist.
I didn't think this was an unreasonable request, but he felt like he couldn't make that choice, and that he shouldn't have to. Because
these aren't feminist things.
I worked full time. I thought it was unjustified for me to be expected to do the duties of a housewife. I had no concept of gender roles because I didn't have a lot of memories of my parents working together as a married couple.
What do you mean gender roles? It's not about gender roles. It's about like roles in your household together. If it's about roles at all, it's more about division of labor than anything. Communication.
My resentment for my husband was partially fueled by a mental illness that I didn't know I had, which caused me to see him as my enemy and another source of male oppression. Over time, my husband and I became more and more estranged until we eventually separated. In 2020, I was diagnosed with a severe case of bipolar disorder, and I reunited with my husband, but I still didn't know how to be a good wife.
Okay. So sounds like you make decisions in a funny way, for sure.
It took 3 years for the doctors to finally prescribe me an effective combination of medications, and then the fog was lifted from
dead. Killed by the woke mind virus.
my mind, and I achieved an acute sense of clarity. Once my mental illness was properly addressed, I could do something to fix my marriage. I discovered a book called Worthy Woman, written by a man named Zach Rody. Zach Rody is a relationship coach who has written several books
Our advocate.
and women can change their behavior in order to mend and form lasting, committed relationships. The content of his books may be considered controversial because it defies the feminist ideology that we've been indoctrinated into following.
Indoctrinated? Who? You didn't act feminist, though. None of the things
She
that
doesn't
you
know what feminism is. I'm a feminist, but I have no idea what it is. Thank you.
Core to feminism. You just were a bad partner.
The word submissive is frequently used in Worthy Woman and has the potential to trigger feminists.
Submissive? You should be submissive, man. Dude, my wife is literally submissive in a sexual way, and we are not, she's not submissive to me in terms of like how we run the household.
Taking the lead.
We are
Stay on
equals.
task.
You know what I mean? Like, we're both adults. She needs her freedom. She needs to be able to, you know, have her space, have things how she likes it. Me too. Same thing. Like, what? If you want to do a sub-dom thing, go for it.
At the time I read the book, I was already partially disillusioned with feminism, and I was open to new ideas. I knew I wanted...
Why does she think feminism is the core of her problem here? You're an asshole, not a feminist.
...to save my marriage. My husband and I both read the book, and together we decided to give his methods a try. Without going into too much detail about the book, it basically educates people about traditional gender roles. I would highly recommend this book to anyone who is having difficulty in their relationship.
Okay. I should write a self-help book. How to be married. Talk to each other. For real, though.
It discusses how women in our society have a tendency towards masculine behaviors that serve to emasculate the men in their lives, which lessens the men's devotion towards those women.
Emasculate the men, which reduces devotion, which are metrics that we can measure. Yeah, I'm wondering if her husband's made up. Is he a made-up guy?
Submission is a tool that women can use to empower them.
Does he know he's your husband?
To effectively take leadership in a way that meets their needs. Submission is not synonymous with servitude, as I previously thought. The book teaches women how to express themselves in feminine ways, such that the men they are with will be motivated to make them happy.
Feminine ways? What does that mean? Just be yourself. God damn it. Stop being a person you think other people want you to be and be the person that you are. I cannot stress this enough. No matter who is listening, no matter what your ideology, people get trapped in it. Be who you are. You don't have to just be an asshole. And if you are an asshole, there are aspects of you that can change. That's totally fine. And in fact, she was an asshole. Sounds like she was a big asshole the whole time. Can't wait for the How to Be Straight chapter, dude. It's gonna be good. How to be straight. You just are. You're boring to me.
Obviously, this technique will not work in all cases, but it did work for my husband and me. Relationships are a delicate balance of masculine and feminine polar energies that coincide to enhance the quality of both people's lives.
I disagree. You don't have to be masculine and feminine to have a marriage. You can be either, neither, both.
It requires maturity and humility on the part of the woman to respectfully defer to the judgment of her man, as long as that man does not abuse her.
Just defer to his judgment in all cases? Just respectfully, unless he is an abusive guy. Fuck, man. I don't know what to tell you. It's just dumb stuff. So, if you have a disagreement about what type of fucking milk to buy, if you go, hey, I want to buy this milk, and he goes, no, I like this milk, do you just go, yes, okay, no matter what? And so, for years, you've wanted the milk. You want the milks. This chalky milk. And he's like, no, 2%. Prairie Farms. No other kinds of milk. You're like, I want to try the Fairlife chocolate milk. And let me tell you, buddy, the Fairlife chocolate milk absolutely slaps. It really does. It's the best chocolate milk out there. And so for years, you're just going to hold on to this.
Giving breast milk on my Cheerios.
And there's going to be 1,000 other situations that are like the milk. And let me tell you, as a man who has had relationships with women, many different women over the years, serial suave man, obviously, let me tell you, the little things build up.
After a few months of embracing traditional gender roles, practicing submission, and showing my husband the respect he deserved, I came to the realization that we were finally happy.
Yeah, so you respecting him is good. You should respect each other. And it's probably working because you never let him do anything, and then he's like, oh, can I have decisions? And he did. And then that was it. But that's not sustainable forever. You have to, it's just a give and take. Holy fucking shit. Just have a dialogue.
A year and a half ago, we were on the verge of divorce, but now, since embracing my feminine nature, we've had 0 arguments.
What does embracing your feminine nature mean? 0 arguments? Do you not feel strongly about anything that you've disagreed with him on once? Sarah and I agree on almost everything, and we still, I would say arguments almost necessarily, but we at least have discussions where we're on opposite sides.
The conflict has completely disappeared and has been replaced by loving reciprocity. I came to find that being the
reciprocity is good. That is not anti-feminist.
leader doesn't make me happy. I don't like ordering people around, nor do I like the responsibility of making all major decisions.
Dude, that's not what feminism is.
Area pacified.
You just don't understand it, huh?
The solution has always been elegantly simple and within my grasp, and now it feels like we are newlyweds. I take my role as a wife and mother very seriously, and I can't describe how rewarding that has been for me.
Dr. Phil, that butt.
It's important to acknowledge the economic reality of most people, which is that their households require dual incomes to pay the bills and keep a roof over their head. God has blessed me with a situation in which
God has blessed me.
I love that. The funniest part. There's a God. Yeah, right.
can actually be a stay-at-home mother and devote my attention towards my family. But this isn't a possibility for many women. I don't know how to fix that. But I do know that feminism has led to dual-income households being the standard for most people because it caused women to flood the workforce in equal numbers as men. This has resulted in women being in a situation where they simply can't spend their time and their lives raising their own children.
Yeah, women don't need to be spending time raising children. However, every single parent wants to spend more time with their kids, I think. Every single one of them. But instead, they're all working like crazy all the time in this country because we're trash. It's a trash country.
Because they're socially required to pursue careers. My enlightenment...
Socially required? Dog, what? That's economically required. You said God has blessed me because they're socially required. No, you understand. It's an economics thing, not a fucking social blessing by God. This is a dumb person. This sucks.
From feminism was painful.
Does she think feminism is misandry? I guess.
Because I felt...
You can have a little healthy misandry.
And still feel like I was deceived. I came to the realization that feminism had infiltrated every corner of my mind and had influenced my values.
You didn't describe feminism. I watched this video and not once did you actually mention feminism? Like, describe feminism. Describe? At best, you were a jerk to your husband, and now you're sipping the right-wing Kool-Aid. I'd be happy to chat sometime about
Found you.
Feminism? Why it's good?
This shit ain't working. We've lost the advantage.
You can't have a good marriage at the same time. Boop.
I had believed in things that were actually lies.
I was gonna make a joke if your husband allows it, but I thought I was already sassy enough in the thing.
This caused me to realize that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was.
I have bad news. It's still true, but in a way you're not smart enough to realize, you know?
Consider myself to be a person who thinks deeply about society and all the implications of our current culture, and I feel obligated to reveal the truth about feminist ideology because I think it's the root cause of many serious issues that we are all currently dealing with.
Okay.
I also believe that if I had known years ago what I know now, I would have made better decisions. The knowledge I've learned has come from the suffering I've accumulated from repeated failure, and I want to pass on this information that I now have so that it might help someone else who's engrossed in this false belief system to
I think she would agree she was a jerk to her husband.
avoid making the same mistakes I did. Feminism has always promoted itself as being a movement that exists for the benefit and advancement of women. Some people consider it to be a movement towards equality of the sexes. Some people consider it to be a movement that wants to place women in a privileged position in relation to men.
I don't think that is the case. I've never heard anyone describe feminism as a way to put women in privilege over men.
Whatever the case may be, the consequences of this social experiment have revealed that it does not benefit women. In fact, it actively works against the interests of women in several ways.
I think you...
Let's hear her reasons, because this is psychotic.
Being an asshole worked against the better interest of you having a marriage, but it sounds like your husband is right-wing anyway? Huh? It sounds like you got a rich right-wing husband, or at least a well-off one, and you almost lost him because you're an asshole. And then, not to say, I mean, I don't know about his side of the story, but I mean, from your side of the story, it sounds like you were a jerk either way. And like, you almost fumbled literally the bag and you got it back, and now you're like, well, better hold on to that shit. That don't want to work. And I don't blame you if that's how you want to fucking roll, man. But I think you should be honest with yourself.
Over the course of a series of videos, I will explain how this is true. For now, thank you for watching, and please check out my next video on the topic of feminism.
Okay. Maybe we will. Yeah, I guess we'll see. She has other videos. How stoicism can help INFPs. Are INFPs weak? What is toxic femininity? Why matriarchies fail? Like, it sounds like you almost went through a divorce and now you're trying to just make videos to make up for it. Sounds like you're like, wait, actually, I hate women because this is your new like thing. And before feminism was totally your thing, you know? The negative consequences of the sexual revolution. The immature versus mature feminine. I don't know, dude. I don't know about that. I don't think she has stuff figured out. Hot take. I'd be happy to talk to her about feminism, though. That'd be interesting if her husband allows it.
Okay, mate.
Sharpshooter removed.
Hello, my friends. So this is a glorious day. Plenty of evidence. These aren't even in the same league. Yet they're nonetheless being presented. Wikipedia's editors nearly unanimously voted to ban the Global Times, a Chinese state media outlet, from being cited, with the stated reason being the Global Times publishes false or fabricated information, conspiracy theories, and propaganda promoting the Chinese government. Now, I actually agree with that assessment completely, but every single one of those reasons also applies equally to Radio Free Asia. They publish false and fabricated information, including conspiracy theories and propaganda promoting the US government. yet they're accepted as a reliable source, literally the complete opposite of Wikipedia's assessment of the global times. That's just one example of how the community's biases often take precedence over Wikipedia's ostensibly espoused rules and guidelines. Since Wikipedia is run by its users and its users as a collective are biased, their consensus reflects that bias. So Wikipedia inevitably ends up reflecting it too. This results in Wikipedia, on average, having a pronounced bias in favor of the status quo in Western countries, and of whatever positions are most convenient for said status quo. For this reason, it's an encyclopedia that, while very useful and undoubtedly an amazing human achievement purely due to its expansiveness, still often directs the reader more towards believing in certain politically charged narratives, rather than whatever's actually closest to the truth. This doesn't necessarily mean it always champions the pro-Western position, because sometimes the opposite position is kind of undeniable, rather that it will, on average, be slanted towards it, often subtly. Hence, why it should always be read very critically and never considered as anything more than just a starting point on any remotely controversial topic. And you know what's a very controversial topic? Enter the Wikipedia page for the Holodomor genocide question. What is that, you may ask? According to the article itself, this article is about the question of whether the Holodomor constituted a genocide. Convenient. Now, you might not know what the Holodomor is, so let's consult Wikipedia on the matter. It states that it was a famine in Soviet Ukraine from 1932 to 1933 that killed millions of Ukrainians, and that it was a part of the wider Soviet famine of 1932 to 1933. That's a decent enough short summary. That's an example of an acceptable citing of Wikipedia. A pretty uncontroversial two-sentence description of something that only total crackpots would deny. Though what immediately follows that part is quite biased. A number of unsourced claims that are clearly directed at pushing the reader towards a certain conclusion, so you always got to be careful and stick to the dry, uncontroversial bits. We're going to be going into much more detail regarding the Holodomor and the broader Soviet famine of 1932 to 33 throughout this video, so I'm going to leave it at that for now to avoid repeating myself. Now, back to the article on the Holodomor genocide question. At first glance, it seems like a decent, relatively unbiased article that presents all viewpoints equally. Right away in the intro, it plays into this idea of balance by citing one guy who says that the academic consensus is that it was a genocide, then another who says the academic consensus is that it actually wasn't, and then another two sources who say that the issue is actually still hotly debated and that there's not actually any consensus at all. Very confusing, but still, all three stances seem to be given equal prominence, just as you'd expect considering Wikipedia's policy of neutrality. However, things get very iffy from there. The intro then goes on to cite the fact that 15 countries recognize the Holodomor as genocide. I don't know why this is even included here. The stances of governments on matters like these have far more to do with whatever is most politically convenient for them than with them honestly assessing the historical evidence, so they're not exactly reliable sources. For a particularly illustrative example of this, in 2003 and 2008, the Australian Parliament formally passed a resolution recognizing the Holodomor as genocide. Yet it's also never actually formally acknowledged its own genocide of Aboriginal people, which there is an overwhelming scholarly consensus supporting. And Australia even rejected the results of a report which the government itself commissioned, which also came to the same conclusion, that the Australian state was guilty of genocide. In fact, Australia even refused to integrate the crime of genocide into Australian law until 2002, specifically to ensure that the state couldn't be taken to court for its genocide of Indigenous peoples. And the only reason that they finally implemented implemented it was to ensure that the International Criminal Court could not try Australians for the crime, and they made sure to include a provision that the law was not retroactive, all because they knew that otherwise they would be prosecuted for their genocide of Indigenous people. So whether something is a genocide is not decided by a parliamentary vote or an executive order from any number of governments, but rather by an exhaustive assessment of the evidence on the matter. And none of these recognitions were based on anything resembling such an assessment. They happened for purely political reasons, including what historian Olga Andruski called a vigorous international campaign initiated by the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs to have the United Nations, the Council of Europe, and other governments recognize the Ukrainian famine of 1932-33 as a deliberate act of genocide against the Ukrainian people. So these are clearly politically motivated recognitions, and they're wholly irrelevant to the question that the article poses, yet are included anyway because they help to instill in the reader the conclusion that the Wikipedia community would like to push. And it gets worse in the main subject of this video, which is the actual body of the article, which presents opinions from both sides of the argument in more detail. What I'm going to be showing here is that Wikipedia editors collectively, whether they actually consciously intended to do so or not, scrape the bottom of the barrel to bolster the case for the famine as genocide position over the not genocide one. Anyone can edit Wikipedia, so it might have changed by the time you're watching this, but as of March and April 2022, this is still the case. They present much lower quality claims on the matter that sometimes aren't even backed up or argued for at all, as if they were equal to the latest historical scholarship, specifically dealing with this exact question in detail, which mostly concludes that the famine was actually not a genocide. And they sometimes even broke Wikipedia's rules and guidelines in the process of doing so. This is quite an old and well-refined Wikipedia article. It's gone through a ton of revisions and a lot of community discussion around improving it. Yet it still ended up in this state, and there's not been any real objections raised about these problems by the Wikipedia community, which certainly backs up what I said about their biases. This type of subtle manipulation is very common throughout Wikipedia, and really to how public opinion is dictated in general, beyond Wikipedia. It's not that some shady cabal of Wikipedia editors have gotten together to lie to you about the Holodomor, though weird things like that do sometimes happen on Wikipedia. Rather, these editors and their habits merely reflect the wider forces that dictate public opinion in their societies. So in a case like this one, where the consensus among historians actually specialize in this topic, which Wikipedia articles about history are meant to be based on, doesn't fit with what most editors would like to be true, they will often collectively manipulate the article to make it as favorable to their preferred version of the truth as they can reasonably get away with. This can be difficult to spot if you're not reading very carefully or aren't already well versed in the topic. It's an excellent example of why you should be very, very critical when reading Wikipedia on anything that's even remotely politically contested, and ensure that you don't let it dictate your own beliefs, or just actually don't read it at all in those cases. That's really ideal. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to present one of the sources that the Wikipedia article cites to support the pro-genocide side, and by pro-genocide I mean they think it was a genocide, not that they actually are pro-genocide literally, okay? And then do the same with one of its sources from the not genocide camp, and we'll keep going until there's none left. Then I'll form a conclusion and give my own hot takes on the matter. It's going to be very, very juicy, so make sure you watch until the end. Let's get right into it with the first source from the Famine as Genocide section. It cites an article by Simon Payaslian, a historian specialized in Armenian history, called 20th Century Genocides, published on the Oxford Bibliography's online website. The part of the page which the wiki article cites is this sentence: a consensus has formed among scholars that genocides in the 20th century encompassed, although were not limited to, the following cases: the Herero genocide, the Armenian genocide, the Holodomor in the former Soviet Ukraine, the Jewish Holocaust, Bangladesh in 1971, Cambodia in 1975 to 1979, East Timor in 1975 to 1999, Bosnia Tanzania in 1991 to 1995, and Rwanda in 1994. In the work itself, this passage provides no citation for this, and this is the only time in the entire article where the author even mentions the Holodomor. I also checked out his other works, and he's never actually written about it specifically. Aside from in this article, he's only ever mentioned it once in passing in an article that was actually about the Armenian genocide. So he's never actually directly addressed the question of whether and why the Holodomor was a genocide himself, nor has he written anything about the purported scholarly consensus on the matter that he mentions here. Funnily enough, he's pretty much only ever actually mentioned in relation to the Holodomor in references to this very Wikipedia article, which for some reason chose to cite him as its first source. Oxford Bibliographies Online is an actual peer-reviewed source, and the historian being cited is an actual historian, though he's clearly not one who has much expertise relevant to this topic and question specifically. Content-wise, however, this source is just totally inadequate and has nothing going for it that is at all really relevant to the Holodomor genocide question, aside from the guy basically saying, yep, it was a genocide, and not explaining anything, just kind of mentioning it in passing. So the very first source presented here is one that doesn't actually directly address the question at hand at all. It rather just makes an unsourced statement, which is then cited in the Wikipedia article. This goes against Wikipedia's own guidelines on reliable sourcing, which state that information in an article must be verifiable in the references cited. In general, article statements should not rely on unclear or inconsistent passages or on passing comments. The citing of Payaslian here is both unverifiable, as his article provides no source for the claim, and it relies on citing a passing comment. The Holodomor just mentioned one time among a bunch of other events, with nothing specific said about it at all. So why is it in the article anyway then? Because the consensus-making mechanisms of Wikipedia dictated that it should be. Those involved are very willing to stretch the bounds of what's acceptable to include if it suits their preferred conclusion. This article has gone through countless revisions and audits, and many sources have been purged from it after being branded unsuitable by community consensus, most of which were against the genocide conclusion. Yet this one still remains. The fact that this article was published by someone who is still at least a real scholar in a real peer-reviewed source helps with all of this. It lends it this superficial aura of authority that the actual substance of the source itself and the rest of the scholar's work fails to back up, which is easy to get away with in a Wikipedia article because very few readers will actually check the sources. And even if someone did check the source and then also decided to put in the time and effort to challenge its inclusion in this article, there's very little chance that they could come out on top against the biases of this community that made this article what it is in the first place. So let's move on to the sources presented that conclude that the Holodomor was not a genocide. The first thing that pops out for me here is that while the Payaslian article is cited both in the Wikipedia page's intro paragraph and used to spearhead the famine as genocide section, the following article that was cited in the aforementioned intro that states the exact opposite, that the consensus is that it was not actually a genocide, isn't actually included in the body of the article itself. This article by historian J. Arch Getty is at least of equal quality as a source as Payaslian's article is, and that's being very generous to the latter. Getty is a specialist on the Soviet Union who has specifically, albeit in a limited capacity, written peer-reviewed work on the Holodomor specifically that directly addresses the question of whether or not it was a genocide. He's also engaged in the public debate surrounding this since the 80s. It makes no sense for Payaslian, who's never actually talked about the topic beyond just a couple of fleeting mentions, to be cited both in the intro and the body, yet for Getty not to be. Unless, of course, the article was trying to lead the reader towards a certain conclusion. Anyway, so the first source that they do include in the famine as crime but not genocide section is an article by the economic historian Michael Ellman, a specialist in the Soviet economy. Ellman's article, written in 2007, is 31 pages long and specifically deals with the question of whether the famine was genocide or not, directly addressing the relevant scholarship. This is a quality, modern scholarly analysis that's very much worthy of being included here. To sum up his stance, he says that the famine was caused by Stalin and his government's policy of forced collectivization of agriculture, which they were genuinely optimistic about when planning and initiating, yet which was disastrous in practice. Since the most common definition of genocide, using the UN definition, requires specific intent, he agrees with some other authors that bad policy that didn't turn out the way those implementing it had hoped cannot be considered genocidal by this common definition. He goes on to state that while by his assessment Stalin's actions once the famine was underway, such as instituting a policy to turn back starving peasants fleeing the affected areas, do constitute crimes against humanity, there is nonetheless just not any evidence fitting of the UN definition of genocide for the same reason that we just went over. Ellman, however, does believe that there is evidence that the Soviet leadership considered some of the famine's victims to have deserved their fate. However, he says that these victims were denounced not based on their nationality or ethnicity, but rather on perceptions of them being the past enemies and idlers. Ellman believes that those who were considered to be parts of those groups were denied relief and possibly even directly killed, but said groups don't fall under any of the categories covered by the Genocide Convention, and they were definitely not targeted specifically being Ukrainian, meaning that these mass killings cannot be considered genocide by the common definition that most of you will understand as genocide. He additionally notes that Russians, Ukrainians, and Kazakhs were all affected greatly by the famine, which extended far beyond just Ukraine itself. So while by his assessment, many of the famine deaths can be attributed to Stalin's callous response and his poor agricultural policies, he would still support a verdict of not guilty, or possibly the Scottish verdict of not proven, for the crime of genocide specifically. Ellman does, however, go on to state that under a broader definition of genocide, which is used by many academics who study genocide, the famine might indeed be considered genocide. Under this definition, a more specific intent is not required. Rather, the offender is culpable because he knew or should have known that the act would destroy, in whole or in part, a group. So it wouldn't matter whether or not there's evidence that the Soviet government wanted to target Ukrainians. What matters is simply that they took actions that they should have or did know will result in the deaths of Ukrainians or fail to save them from death. However, as Ellman goes on to note, this has much wider implications beyond just the USSR. The Holodomor, the purported genocidal mass starvation of Ukrainians, would not actually be exceptional at all. In fact, this would mean that Stalin also committed genocide against Kazakhs and even Russians, since he should have known that his policies would result in their deaths, which diminishes the idea further that he was targeting Ukrainians. He also notes that, under this wider definition, pretty much every Western country, including those who recognize the Holodomor as a genocide, are themselves guilty of genocide during this same time period, making it a shockingly common historical occurrence even well into the 20th and 21st centuries. However, the supporters of the pro-genocide position don't take the stance that Ellman does there. Their assertion is much broader, much stronger, that the famine was intentionally planned and engineered in order to genocide Ukrainians, and that it was unambiguously a genocide under the common definition of the term. You'll see this throughout the video. Most of the rest of the pro-genocide sources presented in the wiki article are very adamant that the famine was intentionally planned and artificially induced, specifically to kill Ukrainians alone. If you look at the quality of the first source that each section here presents, there's really just no comparison at all. One is a historian with an unrelated specialization making a single mention of the Holodomor as genocide in passing without even sourcing their claim, and the other is a historian of a related specialization asserting that it's not a genocide, at least not in the way the pro-genocide camp claims, who specifically addresses the exact question at hand in detail while engaging both with the direct evidence itself and the assessment of other scholars on the matter. That's a massive difference in quality of evidence. these aren't even in the same
Losing
league,
Bravo.
yet they're nonetheless being presented here in this article as if they were Ukraine. And the rest of it is like this too. Let's move on now to the second source from the feminist genocide section. The next citation is of Raphael Lemkin, who was the lawyer who actually coined the term genocide. The quote here is from notes for a speech that he gave in 1953. He wrote, "What I want to speak about is perhaps the classic example of Soviet genocide, its longest and broadest experiment in Russification, the destruction of the Ukrainian nation. The third prong of the Soviet plan was aimed at the farmers, the large, massive independent peasants who are the repository of tradition, folklore and music, national language and literature, the national spirit of Ukraine. As a Soviet politician, Kosior declared in Izvestia on the 2nd of December 1933, Ukrainian nationalism is our chief danger. And it was to eliminate that nationalism, to establish the horrifying uniformity of the Soviet state, that the Ukrainian peasantry was sacrificed. The crop that year was ample to feed the people and livestock of Ukraine, though it had fallen off somewhat from the previous year, a decrease probably due in large measure to the struggle over collectivization. But a famine was necessary for the Soviets, and so they got one to order, by plan, through an unusually high grain allotment to the state as taxes. While Lemkin certainly deserves credit for coining the term genocide and beginning the study of many events through that lens, his opinion here is not actually very relevant to the question at hand. This is one of the only records we have of him ever discussing the Holodomor, and it's not actually a historical study. Rather, it's just some notes that he wrote for himself without giving any actual citations, with no evidence to back up his claims beyond just a single short quote. Another huge problem with this source is its age. Generally, the older a historical work is, the less relevant it is, as more recent work takes into account, builds upon, and supersedes what came before it. And in this case, we're also talking about someone's brief notes, so it was never actually a proper historical study in the first place. In 1953, and indeed for many decades still afterwards, study of the Soviet famines of 1932 to 33 was very difficult due to a complete lack of sources. There were some witness accounts along with the public statements by the Soviet government, but they kept most of their info on the famine secret. Thus, there was just nowhere near enough evidence to make any sound conclusions regarding the famine being genocide or not. Though some, of course, tried anyway, and we'll get to more of them soon enough because they're also cited in this wiki article. All of this changed starting in 1987 when the Soviet government opened their archives. For the first time, internal documents regarding the famine were available to historians, and the result was a drastic shift in scholarship. Beforehand, it was commonly thought that the famine was intentionally planned to kill Ukrainians, regardless of how little evidence there actually was for this conclusion. But after 1987, as those scouring the archives came up short on any evidence for that there, the consensus shifted to be more measured. So anything from before the archives were opened became pretty much totally obsolete. Compared to the scholarship that's been released since, it's really just utter trash, to be honest, based on little more than conjecture and massive logical leaps. A source like this is flatly irrelevant to the scholarly consensus on the matter, regardless of Lemkin's personal prestige. Not only did he simply not have access to anything resembling sufficient evidence to form the conclusions that he makes in these notes, not only did he write this before serious study of the famine had even began, and thus lacked all the insight that it has since provided, but also the work itself is just scribbled notes for a speech, not an actual well-sourced peer-reviewed work. Its inclusion here is therefore very suspect. This seems to be another attempt to bolster the pro-genocide section with low-quality sources that seem reliable only at a glance. The editors of the page also added a number of modern opinions to boost Lemkin's here, something which was not done in any other part of the article, and none of these actually provide any additional evidence that would support his conclusion that the famine was a planned genocide. One is from historian Roman Serban, who merely summarizes what Lemkin was implying, doing nothing to actually support his conclusion. Another's from historian Timothy Snyder, who will be addressing in detail later, as he's included in his own right in the article. He states that the Soviets made sure the term genocide, contrary to Lemkin's intentions, excluded political and economic groups. According to Snyder, the Ukrainian famine could be presented as somehow less genocidal because it targeted a class, kulaks, as well as a nation, Ukraine. This again provides none of the desperately needed evidence to bolster Lemkin's conclusions and doesn't actually address what he wrote on the matter at all. Rather, it makes certain inferences regarding Lemkin's original intentions for the term genocide, which is only tangentially relevant to the subject of this wiki article. Regardless, even though it's kind of irrelevant, I'm going to fact-check the claim. Did the Soviets make sure that genocide excluded political and economic groups, contrary to Lemkin's intent? Snyder doesn't provide a source for this claim in the book in question. This is going to be a recurring theme among the sources cited in this wiki article, by the way, but it's easy enough to find information on this elsewhere. It's true that when the UN Genocide Convention was being drafted back in 1949, the Soviet delegation was opposed to including political groups in it on the stated grounds that the term genocide etymologically referred to immutable traits like race or tribe. But this was hardly unique to the Soviets. It was also a common opinion among many other delegations. As genocide scholar William Shabas wrote, rigorous examination fails to confirm a popular impression in the literature that the opposition to inclusion of political genocide was some Soviet machination. The Soviet views were shared by a number of other states for whom it is difficult to establish any geographic or social common denominator. Lebanon, Sweden, Brazil, Peru, Venezuela, the Philippines, the Dominican Republic, Iran, Egypt, Belgium, and Uruguay. The exclusion of political groups was in fact originally promoted by a non-governmental organization, the World Jewish Congress, and it corresponded to Raphael Lemkin's vision of the nature of the crime of genocide. As you can see from that quote, it's also not exactly true that Lemkin intended to include political groups in the definition himself. He did at times write about them, but during the actual drafting of the Genocide Convention that Snyder is referring to there, a process which Lemkin had a central part in, he preferred to omit political groups as they lacked the required permanency of other included groups, such as ethnicity and race. And contrary to Snyder's additional claim there regarding economic groups, Lemkin not only never considered them to be possible victims of genocide, but that inclusion was never even seriously considered during the drafting of the convention at all. So Snyder is just lying there. It's a lie. And we can see pretty clearly why he didn't cite a source, because the sources disproved him. So to paint this as the Soviet Union making a desperate move to exclude political groups against Lemkin's wishes to absolve themselves of genocide regarding the Holodomor is incredibly misleading, especially since the Soviet delegation explicitly advocated that the killing of political groups should still be considered a crime against humanity. And in general, the Soviet delegation was actually in favor of a much broader definition of genocide, arguing that what is today called cultural genocide should have been included in the convention. Now, this was actually much more in line with Lemkin's intent. During the drafting of the Genocide Convention, he fought bitterly for it to be included. In his biography, he wrote, "We reached the article on cultural genocide. This idea was very dear to me. I defended it successfully through 2 drafts, but many delegations fell silent when I endeavored to explain the importance of this matter. After having overcome so many hurdles and with the end of the assembly in sight, I questioned the wisdom of engaging in still another battle. Would it endanger the passage of the convention? So with a heavy heart, I decided not to press for it." It was not the Soviets who lobbied against this. Rather, it was opposed by Western countries such as Britain, who were afraid that it could be used to prosecute them for actions in their colonies. So the notion that the convention ended up narrowly defining genocide due to a Soviet conspiracy just doesn't sit with the facts. It's also completely nonsensical to include Snyder's inaccurate assertion in this article in the first place, because the claim made by the pro-genocide camp is not even of a genocide against an economic or political group in the first place, but rather one against Ukrainians, meaning a national or ethnic group. And Lemkin clearly meant that in his notes on the matter. So not only are Snyder's claims misleading at best, they're just irrelevant. The only reason they're here is because someone wanted to shoehorn into this article the idea that the Soviets nefariously manipulated the law to get away with the Holodomor. And the Wikipedia community has apparently since found nothing wrong with this. So I just spent like 800 words over this book debunking something that's completely irrelevant to the article because of this. Whoever you are, Wikipedia editor, I hate you. Two more quotes from scholars who are just summarizing
Delete the game, bitches.
position are then also included on top of the previous ones for some reason, both still not actually providing any evidence for his position. Overall, none of these 4 additional inclusions actually do anything to make Lemkin's opinion on the famine any more valuable. He remains a source that's entirely too old, lacking in evidence and quality, and that doesn't actually address the question in depth, instead making sweeping assertions with no explanation for how they were formed. Lemkin's inclusion in this article amounts to nothing more than an appeal to authority. He coined the term genocide, so the reader is supposed to give him special weight, rather than assessing his writing on the subject on its own merits. If you do, it's clear that it doesn't even remotely meet basic academic standards, nor even Wikipedia standards. That's 0 out of 2 so far for the famine as genocide section. Let's finally move on to the next source in the not genocide section. This one is from Stephen Kotkin, another historian who's a specialist on the Soviet Union. He's written numerous books on Stalin where he sticks to the common image of him as a brutal, murderous dictator, and he's made it very clear before that he's an ideological anti-communist, with articles that he's published in the mainstream press titled things like Communism's Bloody Century, where he enthusiastically states his support for free markets and private property. So clearly, about as far as you could get from an ideological Stalinist. Definitely not sympathetic towards Stalin or the USSR, even a little bit. In fact, he's probably biased against them. I think that's fair to say. He directly addressed the question of whether or not the famine was a planned genocide in the 2nd volume of his biography of Stalin, released in 2017. Kotkin says that, funnily enough, the Soviet leadership themselves were the first ones to believe that the famine was planned, but not by themselves in order to kill Ukrainians, rather by well-off peasants in order to undermine the government's agricultural collectivization policy. He ends up concluding that the famine was not intentional, both not in this way, nor as a planned extermination of Ukrainians. Rather, it was an unforeseen consequence of Stalin's agricultural policies. He additionally notes that, because the famine also affected other regions, including Russia and Kazakhstan, in the latter more people died relative to overall population than in Ukraine, that there was no Ukrainian famine. The famine was Soviet. However, instead of directly citing Kotkin's scholarly work on the subject, the wiki page instead sources an interview with him, and it picks and chooses what parts to include and what parts to leave out. It states, according to Stephen Kotkin, while there is no question of Stalin's responsibility for the famine, and many deaths could have been prevented if not for the insufficient and counterproductive Soviet measures, there is no evidence for Stalin's intention to kill the Ukrainians deliberately. According to Kotkin, the Holodomor was a foreseeable byproduct of the collectivization campaign that Stalin forcibly imposed, but not an intentional murder. He needed the peasants to produce more grain and to export the grain to buy the industrial machinery for industrialization. Peasant output and peasant production was critical for Stalin's industrialization. There's a very relevant part immediately following this, however, that's left out of the wiki article, which I feel really solidifies Kotkin's stance. There is no shortage of documentation when Stalin committed intentional murder. However, there is no documentation showing that he intended to starve Ukraine or that he intended to starve the peasants. So Kotkin comes out both against the idea that the famine was intentional to kill Ukrainians, as well as Elman's idea that it was meant to be a punishment of peasants in general. He also directly refutes the point that Elman brought up of peasants not being allowed to leave Ukraine, stating that its significance is overblown, and the motivations behind it were not to kill Ukrainians, but rather to prevent the spread of disease. There is a story about how Stalin blocked peasants' movement from the regions of starvation to the areas where there might have been more food. With all those documents, we know that of the roughly 17 million farmers in Ukraine, about 200,000 peasants were caught up in this interdiction process. The regime's motivation for this was to prevent the spread of disease that accompanied the famine that the regime caused, however unintentionally. While he disagrees with Elman on these points, the two of them are definitely in agreement that the famine doesn't constitute genocide by the common definition of the term, and definitely not in the way that the pro-genocide camp commonly asserts. They agree that it was not intentionally planned, and that Ukrainians were not specifically targeted. This is again a high-quality source in comparison to those thus far included in the pro-genocide section. Nonetheless, the way it's presented in this article is very reductive. Only a short passage from an interview is included, whereas the editors decided to bolster Lemkin's writing on the subject by including the opinions of 4 scholars. The contrast between both the quality of these sources and the way they're treated by Wikipedia is quite stark. So, thus far we have 2 very low-quality sources in the pro-genocide section, one of which is little more than a passing reference, while the other presents no evidence and is literally 70 years old, in contrast with 2 opinions of modern scholars in the non-genocide section, whom have cited a lot of evidence and directly addressed the arguments of other modern scholars on the matter. Yet the article nonetheless presents all of these as if they're somehow equal, and 99% of readers will probably come away from it thinking exactly that, just as the editors collectively would have liked them to. Let's move on to the third source in the pro-genocide section, the opinion of the late historian Robert Conquest, who was a specialist on the Soviet Union. Conquest openly described himself as a cold warrior, meaning a writer who considered themselves to be partisan fighters in the propaganda arena during the Cold War. In Conquest's case, the side that he fought for was certainly the West. And this is a 100% accurate description of him that he himself certainly would have agreed with. He didn't hide his biases at all. In fact, he owned them. So I'm not trying to poison the well here. He just factually was a pro-West, anti-Soviet polemicist, and he relished in that. So he's evidently quite a biased source, but bias alone is no reason to discount his work entirely. The wiki article cites his book on the famine, The Harvest of Sorrow, which was co-written with historian James Mace and released in 1986. This book was one of the first academic works that specifically addressed the question of whether the famine was planned and then induced as an intentional attempt to starve Ukrainians or not. Conquest concluded both that it was and that it was a genocide, and interestingly, cited the aforementioned notes by Raphael Lemkin in doing so. Conquest's work, biased as it may have been, was still a serious argument, and one that, at least at the time, could not simply be ignored. Even those who disagree with its conclusions still nonetheless cite the book to this day, because it still includes useful eyewitness accounts and translations of Soviet documents. Conquest did not, however, actually uncover any direct evidence that the famine had been planned or had specifically targeted Ukrainians. Rather, he relied on some very broad inferences and circumstantial evidence, a practice which perhaps made more sense at the time since access to secret Soviet government documents was non-existent then. However, literally the next year, the Soviet archives started to be opened, and the lack of any evidence uncovered there heavily complicated his conclusions. Conquest, despite his clear biases and his open acknowledgement of the fact that he intentionally wrote anti-Soviet propaganda, was nonetheless capable of admitting it when new evidence came out that proved him wrong. After the archives failed to produce any evidence supporting the intentional famine thesis, he corresponded with scholars Stephen Wheatcroft and Robert Davies, whose work we're going to be getting into very soon. They noted that, while in his writings and speeches from the 80s, Conquest constantly made claims like Stalin wanted a famine, and that the famine was deliberately inflicted for its own sake, when writing to them, he heavily dialed back these conclusions, instead stating that Stalin purposefully inflicted the 1933 famine? No. What I argue is that with resulting famine imminent, he could have prevented it, but put Soviet interest other than feeding the starving first, thus consciously abetting it. That is a huge departure from his original book, which painted the famine as a planned and engineered genocide of Ukrainians. Wheatcroft and Davies also note that Conquest even stopped calling the famine a genocide later in his life. So to include him in the pro-genocide section here is puzzling, since he clearly changed his mind later on and no longer considered it to be a genocide. And the worst thing about this is that all of this is included in the Wikipedia article. It says that he wrote a book in the 80s where he claimed the famine was a planned genocide, then later changed his stance after the expected evidence of this failed to surface. This really comes off as just another desperate inclusion to bolster what would otherwise be a pretty empty pro-genocide section. It in fact just contradicts itself without elaborating at all. First it says that Conquest supported the view that the famine was a planned act of genocide. Then, without elaborating at all, 1 second later, it says that he later changed his mind to the exact opposite. That's just going to leave the reader very confused. They're going to be thinking, well, what was his position then? Why is he in the pro-genocide section? What's even going on? So Conquest really shouldn't even be in the pro-genocide section of the article at all, because he was most recently against the idea that it was genocide. It would actually make infinitely more sense to put him in the opposite section, because that someone as openly biased as Conquest changed his opinion on the matter is pretty damning for the planned and engineered genocide claim, especially since his book on the matter was one of the first seriously popular academic attempts to argue that position. And those who still hold that position often still rely entirely on citing his book. So the scholar who was essentially the founding father of that argument himself renounced it, yet he's still for some reason included in the pro-genocide camp on Wikipedia. That's 0 out of 3 for the pro-genocide section. Not looking good. The next citation in the no genocide section is of specialist in the Soviet economy, Robert Davies, and specialist in Soviet history, Stephen Wheatcroft. These two often wrote about the Holodomor as a team, hence why they're listed together. And they've written a whole lot on the subject, as well as a whole lot specifically on the genocide question, probably more than any other authors in fact. Their work on the famine has been very important, as they bring an attention to detail on the economic side of things that had largely been ignored beforehand. While authors like Conquest look for explanations in speeches and eyewitness accounts, primarily searching for ways to blame Stalin, Wheatcroft and Davies combined those with detailed assessments of the economic data released following the opening of the Soviet archives. Their book along these lines, The Years of Hunger, is now pretty much required reading on the subject, and Wheatcroft especially has written a lot more on it since. In the preface to the revised edition of this book, their position is made very clear. In our work, we have found no evidence that the Soviet authorities undertook a program of genocide against Ukraine. The book's conclusion elaborates on this. We do not at all absolve Stalin from responsibility for the famine. His policies towards the peasants were ruthless and brutal. But the story which has emerged in this book is of a Soviet leadership which was struggling with the famine crisis, which had been caused partly by their wrong-headed policies, but was unexpected and undesirable. The background to the famine is not simply that Soviet agricultural policies were derived from Bolshevik ideology, though ideology played its part. They were also shaped by the Russian pre-revolutionary past, the experiences of the Civil War, the international situation, the intransigent circumstances of geography and the weather, and the modus operandi of the Soviet system as it was established under Stalin. They were formulated by men with little formal education and limited knowledge of agriculture. Above all, they were the consequence of the decision to industrialize this peasant country at breakneck speed. So for Davies and Wheatcroft, who analysed the economic data in much more detail than anyone else before them, the famine was not a genocide of Ukrainians or any other national group. Rather, it was the result of a failure of agricultural policy, combined with environmental factors such as drought and low rainfall, that created a grain shortfall. The primary failure of policy was the disastrous attempt to rapidly force peasants to move away from traditional smallholding and into collective farming. With hindsight, they say that these policies were at the very least implemented way too fast. But Soviet leaders of the day didn't have the benefit of hindsight. They earnestly believed in these policies and were not implementing them with the goal of intentionally killing anyone. Rather, they hoped for the exact opposite outcome, to produce more food to feed more people and to sell. Possibly Wheatcroft and Davies' biggest contribution to the discussion is their estimate, using material from the archives, of a substantial grain shortfall of around 10 million tons in 1931 and 1932. This showed that, contrary to the assumption long held by the pro-genocide camp, that there was an adequate harvest which authorities intentionally kept from the peasants to starve them, the famine was the result of a legitimate food shortage. And thus the central question regarding the famine is not, did Stalin intentionally withhold food from Ukrainians, but rather what caused the shortage? This is backed up by Wheatcroft and Davies' archival research, which uncovered evidence of previously unknown secret relief measures carried out by the government, which refuted another common argument among the pro-genocide camp that the government intentionally did not provide relief to starving peasants from their supposedly ample grain surplus. Wheatcroft notes that it was these two revelations specifically which changed Conquest's mind on the subject. Conquest had previously believed that Stalin intentionally withheld abundant stocks of food from Ukrainians and that his government had refused practically all relief. But this evidence showed otherwise, rendering Conquest's conclusions invalid. Wheatcroft also notes that the pro-genocide position has regained popularity in recent times, not due to legitimate scholarly validity, but rather for purely political reasons. He wrote, "Discussions in the popular narrative of famine have changed over the years. During Soviet times, there was a contrast between man-made famine and denial of famine. Man-made at this time largely meant as a result of policy. Then there was a contrast between man-made on purpose and man-made on accident, with charges of criminal neglect and cover-up. This stage seemed to have ended in 2004, when Robert Conquest agreed that the famine was not man-made on purpose. But in the following 10 years, there has been a revival of the man-made on purpose side. This reflects both a reduced interest in understanding the economic history and increased attempts by the Ukrainian government to classify the famine as a genocide. It is time to return to paying more attention to economic explanations." So if you think that the Holodomor was an intentional genocide of Ukrainians, it's probably not because the academic scholarship dictates so, more because there's a political narrative being spread. The Wikipedia article, however, doesn't go near into the level of detail regarding their views as I just did. Rather, it actually tries to delegitimize Wheatcroft and Davies and obfuscate just how categorically they've asserted that the famine was not murder nor genocide. For example, it cites Wheatcroft's review of a book on how this famine affected Kazakhstan, stating that Wheatcroft comments that nomadic and peasant culture was destroyed by Soviet collectivization, which complies with Raphael Lemkin's older concept of genocide, which included cultural destruction as an aspect of the crime, such as that of North American Indians and Australian Aborigines. However, this is just a lie. Wheatcroft was summarizing an argument in a book that he was reviewing. He was not stating this as his own opinion. It was someone else's argument that he was restating for the benefit of someone who might want to buy the book. Yet whoever made this edit nonetheless decided to cite an obscure book review and misleadingly present this as Wheatcroft's own view. This has the clear effect of making the reader think that perhaps Wheatcroft and Davies' opinion that the famine was not genocide is not as strong as it actually is. And it is very strong since they've argued just that repeatedly for 2 decades. This section then also includes a criticism of Wheatcroft and Davies from the aforementioned Michael Ellman, essentially just restating Ellman's opinion on the matter that we addressed earlier. This is fine, I guess, but the question has to be asked, why not then also include